Welcome to Chalk Dust, the podcast that gives you a front row seat to some of the best classrooms in the world. I'm Rebecca Birch.
And I'm Dr. Nathaniel Swain.
I'm currently academic in residence at a girls' school in Sydney. I'm an English teacher and I'm also completing PhD research on how explicit instruction supports student wellbeing.
And I'm a teacher and instructional coach, and I've taught in primary school classrooms around Melbourne, Australia, and I work with schools nationwide to strengthen teaching practice and drive school improvement.
We're adding our voice to the growing field of evidence-informed education podcasts, but with a distinctive focus.
Each episode features expert commentary and authentic classroom footage, and you can listen wherever you get your podcasts, but the real experience is when you watch along for all the detail on Substack or YouTube.
Some of our listeners tell us that they're sharing episodes with their department, and some of them use it to spark discussion in their professional learning sessions. So if you or your school find it valuable, a really simple like or a follow on one of our platforms is a great way to show your support and help us reach more teachers. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands I'm recording from and those where you may be listening. Here in Sydney, I acknowledge the Gadigal people and pay my respects to elders past and present.
And I pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, on whose lands I'm recording today.
And today we're joined by a very special guest. John Hollingsworth is the president and co-founder of DataWorks Educational Research. He's dedicated to helping struggling students succeed in their learning. Together with his wife, Dr. Sylvia Ibarra, he co-authored Explicit Direct Instruction, The Power of the Well-Crafted, Well-Taught Lesson. It's a bestseller and it's referred to in Australia really fondly as the Purple Book. It shows us how to achieve high student success through strong whole class instruction. Welcome, John.
Well, thank you for inviting me here today. You mentioned your background in Australia. I can give you my background in Australia. I've taught all across Australia at remote Indigenous schools as part of a government grant many years ago that we were working with to help students across the country. And these were 10 hours on a dirt road to get there. And, they chartered little planes for us. But I'm in California in the United States, but our company's done a lot of work in Australia.
And in Australia, when they say remote, they really mean remote.
Yeah, no.
So the first video that we're going to look at together is an excerpt of some footage of a maths lesson looking at unit fractions. And we're going to just get started and look straight at the footage.
Now I want you to interpret the unit fraction. Megan? You need some more time? Okay, go ahead and interpret your unit fraction, and then I'll ask somebody else, but I'm coming right back to you, so be ready to answer. Jason, can you interpret your unit fraction, please?
The unit fraction.
Okay, you know something? We're going to read this word together one more time. Represents. Let's read it one more time, please. Represents. One more time. Represents. Okay, Jason.
The unit fraction represents one slice of eight equal slices.
Very nice. 8 equal slices. That's what that means. Okay, one more person. And Daisy?
The unit fraction represents one slice of 8 equal parts.
Is it parts in this case, or should we call it slices?
Slices.
Okay, so can you read the last 2 words for me, please?
Equal slices.
Yeah, because we're talking about the pizza. You know, in mathematics, sometimes we talk about parts because we're talking about a circle, but in this case, we're talking about equal parts of a pizza, so there's slices. Megan, are you ready to interpret?
The unit fraction represents one slice of 8 equal slices.
Of 8 equal slices. Very nice.
So John, what do you usually point out to teachers when they see this "I'll come back to you" routine in action for the first time?
Well, I can give you a lot of background for it. This is a skill development, and you've heard of I do, we do. So the teacher already worked the first one on the left side, and the students worked the second one. Now, what we discovered when you do checking for understanding, you need some strategies when the students can't answer. You can't be stuck. You need to go forward. So one of our strategies, I'll come back to you. You heard that little phrase, I'll come back to you. So that gives the chance for the student to look back at the page, to think about it, to hear the other students, and it takes them off the spot. It kind of releases the pressure. You don't say, why don't you have an answer? You're saying, well, I'll come back to you. I'll give you a chance. Go back and look and be ready. I'll come back to you. So this is a great strategy to use. It's one of our main ones we teach for feedback. We have other ideas of feedback, but this one, I'll come back to you. And I think you mentioned both of you are doing some classroom coaching.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a great coaching strategy. If you're in the classroom, the teacher gets stuck. You say, well, can you come back to that student and ask somebody else? So it's a very good one to coach with.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the routine, and I'll come back to you all the time when modeling how to make non-volunteers work really well, and I'm heavily influenced by your work there, John. So how important is it for that randomization of choosing different non-volunteers versus when teachers say select themselves?
Well, I don't know if you've read all the history of DataWorks, but someplace we've been in 25,000 classrooms, and you've been in the classroom also with coaching. The teacher usually calls the same 3 people in the front of the room the whole year. When you're trying to make an instructional decision, do the students know it? And you're being completely fooled. Your poll, your little statistical check, only works if you call students randomly. That includes the ones in the back, the one on the side, the peripheral students. So it has to be non-volunteers, or you're actually fooling yourself.
And I just got a question about the choral responses. So I noticed that, when we have these choral responses, everyone gets a chance to respond. But I was wondering as well if part of it was about normalizing mistakes. So one student makes a mistake, then the whole rest of the class chimes in with a correct answer. Is there an aspect of both to that strategy?
Well, I'm going to give you a little tip here. There's a second level of sophistication. You have your popsicle sticks, I think I've got some right here, and you're calling non-volunteers. However, when you do whiteboards, you call a correct answer. You can pull out any stick you want, but you select a correct answer. That's actually the rule, because you want the students to hear the correct answers. So the first couple of students are correct answers. And I think, some of this brain research, the things you hear first start to jump into your brain.
Right, yeah.
And I don't want the kids to hear the wrong answers. And we actually have a little phrase we do that students, if you realize you made a mistake, just go ahead and erase it. It's okay. Because I see students try to defend the wrong answer. Now, the teacher, you call the correct answers, then you go around and call the incorrect or the changed answers. So you do call them. And I think from EDI, your goal is 80%. It has to be 80% with the boards. If you don't have 80%, it's just boards down and reteach. And then feedback to individual students.
John, when we tell teachers, when they're coming into contact with EDI at first and you talk to them about the 80%, they find it a bit confronting that you'd be willing to leave behind 20%. And so can you fill us in about how you would actually address that 20% that's left? I think it's a question that a lot of teachers have when they're first adopting EDI.
Oh, I think we've misinterpreted. It's teach the whole class to 80%. You don't need to teach the whole class for 2 students, then reteach the whole class for 1. So it's whole class to 80%, then it's corrective feedback to the individual students. I see you have a different answer. Can you explain? Can you go back and look in the table? Can you look at the first paragraph or the first sentence? The goal is actually 100%. It's whole class to 80%, corrective feedback to 100%. Now think about this, to 100% for every question.
And would you do that as, in that small group instruction phase, or would you do that on the spot?
No, we do it right with the whole class. Can you check the answer again? Can you look back in sentence number 1? Can you read it with me? And you give the kids cues and prompts, and there's different strategies in there. But we just taught 64 demo lessons last week, and we basically had 100%. I mean, we had 4 people, 64 lessons over 2 days, I think 3rd grade to high school, and we got it. It's easy to do. Now, you remember the EDI, you teach first. You're not doing what we call forward question. I'm not asking you for the content before I taught it. That does not work. A lot of teachers like to say, well, who knows what this? Who knows what photosynthesis? Who knows what checks? Who knows what these things mean? And the kids don't know. So you have to teach first.
Great. Should we look at another clip, Nathaniel?
Yeah, we're ready to look at now one from a 6 to 8 grade level, one on ELA this time, so English Language Arts.
Evidence supports the argument. And how we're going to remember appropriate, the next one is we're going to do this. Does the evidence match? Does it fit? Your hands fit into each other, right? Okay, so we're going to use this. Does the evidence fit? It's appropriate. So turn to your shoulder partner, and I want A's to say appropriate And I want B's to say, does the evidence fit? Using your gestures. Ready? A. Okay, and I'd like you to switch now. Use this word adequate, meaning, is there enough evidence? So do this with me. Is there enough evidence? What do we see for evidence? Is there 1, 2, 3, 4? There could be more than those, okay? So we're going to use these fingers as our evidence, so to remind us.
Let's do this. I think we're ready for the super pair share. Let's stand up, turn to your neighbor, and tell your partner everything you learned today. Get up your paper in case you need to look at it. Assessing author's argument. So I'm going to call a couple of people to just tell me a couple things you can say when you go home tonight. What did you learn at school today? You've got all kinds of good stuff.
Today I learned about accurate. Accurate is the evidence true? Appropriate, does it fit? And adequate, is there enough?
Okay, let's get around with all those good gestures.
So, John, just going back to that first video, we had this great teacher using gesture to explain, parts of language and how to write in a certain style. I was just wondering, with secondary students, how long do you persist with gesture? Like, do they find it silly at first? Does it take a while to get used to it? Do you have to practice? I'd love some advice around that because, I'm a secondary teacher and I'm just wondering how that would go over.
Well, I can add a little new phrase from our brain research. The brain is processing as the brain is learning. While you're teaching, the teacher's brain is processing. And I even have a phrase when I coach sometimes, I said, teacher, you're teaching yourself. The students are just sitting there. Okay, you need to do something. Okay, so you need to use gestures. I know we have another video coming up, but I just taught high school euphemisms and oxymorons. I don't know if you can see the camera, but euphemisms, look at my hand. We're trying to hide something.
Oh, I love that.
Contradict.
Yes.
I heard every student doing it.
Oh, that's so good.
Oxymoron. Euphemism. We don't say old people, we say senior citizens, because what we're trying to cover up a little bit and to soften and hide. That gesture works. And I want the kids to do it. By the way, this is brain strategy. You remember the gestures easier than you remember the words.
Yeah, okay.
Now, here's another one. You guys are coaches. Both of you are coaches. You can cue kids by doing this. Is this you can give the cue without actually saying anything. It's a great cue. And the brain actually learns the gestures. And I'll just ask you, how many kinesthetic activities do we have for students? They're actually academic.
Yeah, really none. Yeah.
And look, I'd use gestures in my coaching as well. Rebecca and I do it in secondary and primary. Probably in secondary, sometimes they look at me and think he's a bit daggy. But many teachers I've talked to afterwards have said, I've done that and I've introduced a complicated term from physics about what happens with the electrons, and we're all getting the year 11s or year 12 students to gesture in order to remember it. So I reckon you can make it work if it's called for by the content.
And those little ones, John, that you demonstrated there, they're not so strange. We're not getting up and spinning around and, doing a little dance. It's quite discreet. And so do you have to repeat those a lot over time for them to really take hold?
Well, first of all, I do it myself. I say we're all going to do it together. I want the whole class to do it. And then say, I want you to turn your partner and give the definition and the gesture with each other. Fair share the gesture right there. So we've probably done it at least 4 times right there. Okay. And then I start using it while I'm teaching. And you'll see kids, you've probably seen it, they start doing it under the desk. And a lot of research that this cues the words in your mind, because humans can learn gestures faster than they can learn the words. You learn the gestures very quickly. And then they kind of pull the words back out later.
I love that idea, though. You're saying that some teachers are literally just teaching themselves when they're on a monologue or just having a good old chat and hoping the students are listening. We talk a lot with our fellow teachers and people that we're coaching about the importance of active engagement. And we love the engagement norms from EDI, for example, as a way to do that. And obviously gesture with me is one of those ones. It's just so important, isn't it, to get students moving, to get them thinking, to get them actively doing things rather than just sitting there and enjoying the monologue from the teacher.
Well, I'm going to give you some eye-opening brain research. Attention span used to be like 1.5 minutes. Then it was a minute. Attention span is now 47 seconds. 47 seconds. We have a rule. Teachers, you need to do 2 or 3 things per minute. Per minute, not per hour. Like, we're going to use a gesture. Then we're going to pair share. We're going to hold up our whiteboards. We're going to answer and complete. We're just going to read something. And, I used to coach teachers, especially history and social science. They're just lecturing. And I said, you've got a poster. Have the kids read the bullets with you, at least. Do something. So keep this in mind now, 2 or 3 times per minute. It's much more. I'm just telling you because the brain is tuned out. The eyes are looking, but the brain is drifting.
Yeah.
Something we're really
Getting less.
passionate about, isn't it, Rebecca?
Absolutely.
All right, let's look at some more gestures now with some props as well involved. This is a plate tectonics lesson.
Right.
Convergent boundaries. Okay, here's a picture of it. Let's read the definition first.
A convergent boundary occurs when one plate dots under another.
Circle con, the first part of this word con. Con, I know in Spanish means with. Chile con carne means with something. So con means what? They're coming together. So we're going to remember that little prefix. Con is what they're coming together. They come together and one dies under another. So they don't just hit and crunch like a car crash. They actually kind of go like this. So one flows up and the other kind of bends down. Okay, they're great big and they kind of go like this. So let's do this with our hands. Let's pretend we have two continents or two plates. As they come together, one of them goes down. So bend your hand down a little bit and then the other one kind of bend up a little bit. Okay, have you got that? Let's do it one more time. Convergent, what are we doing? Coming together and we're kind of going like this. Let's slip over each other. So it's the same thing. Convergent, coming together, divergent, coming apart. So let's read it. Ready, go.
Divergent boundary, we hope it's a divergent boundary occurs and breaks for a way.
So then they diverge, they're going apart like this. Okay, show me your hands. What are they doing? Pretty easy, they're coming apart. So let's get our hands up there. We're transvergent, we're going like this. All right, one more time. Convergent, we're coming together. Divergent, we're going apart. And trans is what? We're going like this. Okay.
So I really like the use of props and the use of gestures there, John. I think even for high school students, you can see how this is going to be the thing that clicks for them later on when they're, processing or wondering about this lesson, I think.
Well, I'm trying to get away from the 45-minute high school lecture where the teacher just talks and the students don't do anything. And this was a very easy one to do with the gestures. Now, I'm going to give some feedback to myself. Remember when I had the kids do the gestures? I should have said, have the kids say convergent, divergent. They didn't say anything, did they? They actually read off the board with me, but I should have had them say it with their hands also. That would have been one more. And I think you noticed up there, we had a graphic organizer to see we had the word, the definition, and the attributes. So it's not just a long lecture. I think if you know history and science, sometimes you're organizing information. So that's another thing we did on the side. But the kids are reading through the lesson. They're not just sitting there while I'm teaching myself. They're actually doing something.
And I did really like how you work the slide in that way. So this is something that you talk about at DataWorks. In that there's information there. It's organized beautifully into a graphic organizer, as you said, but it's not just, let's just read it out, start to finish and not doing anything with it. Like it's all about how you bring it to life for the students, which I think is really clever. In Australia, we've got lots of slides being used, but sometimes people feel like they are forced to sort of read them start to finish and not actually bring them to life. So they blame the slides, so to speak, for the problems with the teaching, in my opinion.
Well, let me tell you this. We had the phrase you almost gave it, that was called work the page. So you read it, you point, basically, you remember concept development, written definition, labeled examples. So you read chorally, then you just explain and you point how it does it. Read and explain, read and explain. So that's what we're trying to do there. Last week while I was coaching, a teacher got up, like you said, and just read the whole slide. I mean, from top to bottom, the checking for the I had to stop and say, let's go back again and have the students read with you. And boy, did the class perk up then. We're going to read, then you're going to explain and maybe do a gesture or something. So that's one thing. Get that idea, work the page, and don't just read down the page. You know, there's nothing worse than a PowerPoint where the presenter reads the slides.
Yeah, definitely.
And John, just for your background and context, in Australia, we've got a few systems who have mandated explicit instruction. And probably the biggest misconception teachers have is that it's chalk and talk, that it's long lecture style. And I think that sometimes they're quite shocked to see, say, videos like this, where there's actually a lot that the students are asked to do. You know, they're being asked to do something every, 20, 30 seconds or so. And so I'm just wondering, so if you're a new teacher and you want to start adopting explicit direct instruction, do you think it's better to practice those opportunities during the lesson to ask students to respond or to factor it into your planning? Is there a bit of both there? I'm just wondering if some of this preparation for EDI actually has to happen outside the classroom or whether it's a skill you have to cultivate through that active instruction.
Well, you guys are doing, I'm sure you're doing real-time coaching. It's called in-situational coaching. And the research says that's the only way you can really get implementation is cueing them in real time. If you send an email to a teacher, you could have pair shared, it doesn't work. And we've learned this. I think, the only thing that works is having them do it in the real time. Now, the second one is your job to meet with them before the lesson. So here's a couple of things you can do. I want you to identify the concept development. I want you to write some checking for understanding questions, either identify them in the works or write them on a yellow sticky and be ready. I want you to identify the match problems, put T and S. Which one are you going to work as a teacher? Which ones are the students going to work? So just right there, some pre-written checking for understanding, identify concept development, and then match the problems. That's your pre-meeting.
And then everything after that is in the moment, so making sure that you're sort of almost, I think of it almost as like you're almost manufacturing opportunities for them to respond, especially when attention starts to drop off. You're sort of thinking, how do I bring them back and re-engage them in this thing that's happening? So injecting that structure in the moment, which is hard.
You need to do it. Usually if I'm training teachers, I just have, let's read the next line together so that I'm not just giving the slide by myself. And then, of course, I'll say, then I have a question and we do it. I'll just tell you one other thing now. I don't know if you use this. Do you have pre-written checking for understanding questions?
Tend to, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so we have a lot of high quality instructional materials in Australia, and they have the check for understanding written in there. And then Nathaniel and I, as part of our coaching, is trying to encourage teachers to put more in and have those opportunities really well planned so that the thinking has happened before they walk in the classroom.
And we also encourage that if there's a really important moment where you realize this really does need a CFU question right now, that teachers can add those as the moment arises as well. So they're much more adaptive as well as sort of pre-planned as well.
Well, let me tell you one thing you can take it to the next level is have the pre-written sentence frame along with the question. And it has to have academic vocabulary. The complete sentence, not my answer is B or I wrote Cinderella. It has to be the character in the passage is Cinderella because. So the sentence frame is the character in the passage is blank because blank. And we read it together. Now, I want you to think when the kids read the thing, like what's the text structure in the passage, and then you're going to answer the text structure in the passage is, they've already said it twice. Text structure, passage. Then they're going to talk to their partner and say it 2 more times. They're using academic language. Students do not use academic language. They use conversational language. So you need to force it. So put this down and saying, how can we take it to the next level? Pre-written sentence frames to answer, and it has to have the academic language in it.
Great.
Yeah, love that.
All right, our next video is critiquing the logical function of documents. And we're going to look in depth at learning intentions.
Put our hand here. I'll read it first and we'll read together. Today, we will critique the logic of functional documents. Let's read together. Today, we will critique the logic of functional documents, okay? Let's just have the A person read the objective to your B partner, and then I'll ask a couple of you what we're going to do. So A, read to B.
Today we will critique the logic of functional documents.
Okay, let's have B's read it. Go ahead, B's read it. Okay, this is easy. I'm going to pick someone. Let's see, 13.
Today we will critique the logic of functional documents.
Yeah, that's easy. You know, we're kind of doing this so you say these words. You might have said critique before or functional documents before.
So, John, we've got a lot of repeating back. What's the value of repeating back, even if it's just saying the exact same words again?
Well, I've talked about this idea of academic language. There were the words critique, logic, and functional documents. Students do not use that language. New words. I want them to say it. I want them to get it in their working memory and start thinking about it and using it. And we did it 4 times. I read first. Now, do you notice I pointed to the words while we read? Because I'm trying to support reading fluency. There might be poor readers in there. I don't want them to just listen. I want them to look at the words. Then we read it chorally. Then we pair shared. That's 2 more times. We're up to 4. Then I called the student to read it back. That's 5 times. And sometimes the students will stumble back because we really need to support fluency. A lot of students I work with, a lot of schools I work with, the reading fluency is very low. And we're trying to read as much as possible. And they say, wow, an EDI, even a math lesson, the kids are reading the whole time. I said, yeah, we're supporting reading all day long. And the fact that I pre-read it when necessary allows everyone to do it. And by the way, you don't need to pre-read everything for high school and older students. You're really pre-reading when there's difficult new words and academic words I want you to use. And I actually explained that to the kids. I said, you don't use these words, we're going to use them in the classroom. So I don't really have any pushback from the students.
Yeah. So my favorite part of your book actually is this stage of telling students why it's important. I think in secondary, it's almost like the most important part of the lesson. And I noticed that you would illuminate to the students why they were asked to repeat certain words, that you're not going to say these words in the playground. So I think that's really valuable. And so do you sort of narrate that usefulness throughout the whole lesson often? You know, that when you do an activity, you state why that aspect is important, not just at the beginning of the lesson?
You talk about the importance of the strategies, like that we're going to read and pronounce words.
Yeah, just illuminating that to the students. You know, you're saying to them, well, we're gonna repeat this word because it's not a word that you're going to use every day.
Well, I'll just tell you that lesson is a school in Los Angeles that I just walked in cold and started teaching. So I don't know the students. I don't know anybody. I've just done it. The amazing part is it works. Just walking in cold. And I even tell people, don't tell me the struggling students. I'm going to use the sticks. Everybody's going to be successful. So a lot of times we use this kind of the initial time we're trying to teach some people, but I don't need to tell students like every day we're pronouncing these words. I mean, we've got the idea after you've done it a few times. High school, sometimes you need to kind of establish the reason why we're doing it.
Right.
In the next video, we're actually looking at a follow-on from that and talking about the lesson importance, not just the teaching sort of strategy importance. So it'd be good to continue that discussion after this one.
So write down 1, 2, or 3. You can look up here why it's important. Number 1 is what? You're going to have to use them, and I have some examples right here. Number 2, it might be tested. And number 3, you might have to write them. Now explain to your partner which one you picked and why you think it's the most important. Whiteboards up. Let me see your whiteboards. Let me see what you picked. So who's number 3? Which one did you pick?
1.
And what does number 1 say? Why don't you tell me a complete sentence? Let's all practice our sentence. Tell your neighbor, it's important to critique the logic of functional documents because, and then have your answer after that sentence.
It is important to critique the logic of functional documents because we need our professionals to deep word.
Ready.
Yes, ready.
All right, I'm going to pick somebody. I still have number 3 left. Okay, can you tell me now?
It is important to critique the logic of functional documents because it will help us understand better.
Later in life.
So Rebecca, you often talk about many different reasons or levels of importance that happen in a lesson, and that in some ways it's going to be surface level or utility wise, like it's in the test that you're going to have to do, or it's something you're going to learn next year. But sometimes there's a real world consequence as well, and a real world application. John, which reason do you think students pick most often in terms of what the lesson means to them and why they're finding it useful?
Well, I can tell you something. We didn't see that whole video, but part of it was you're going to have to read functional documents. They might be tested. And also, you might have to write some or use them in business or on the job. So importance in high school should always be connected to a career. It's career related. The doctors, lawyers, writers, marketers, advertising people. And I'm going to tell you one of the most stunning moments. I was in an inner city school, and I said, students, why are we learning this figurative language like Shakespeare is using? And she says, I want to get a job using my brains and not my hands.
Oh, I love that.
After that, this is an inner city school. A lesson with Shakespeare quotes, and she got the idea of figurative language could help you in a career. Okay, so it really does work. So part of the thing is like motivation, and why are we learning it? Kids say that every day, like, why are we learning this? And teachers, it's your job to explain, in part of every lesson. Now, notice we also have the academic layer. It's important to critique the logic of functional documents. I still want you to say those words. I don't want you to say 1, 2, or 3. I want you to say it, and I want you to justify it. It's pretty interesting. When the kids start justifying, you can really hear their brain starting to work, why they want to do this or something.
The research into motivation as well, John, really backs you up there. So that's actually part of supporting students' autonomy, believe it or not, because you're giving them a reason to actively engage in what's coming next.
Yeah.
So you're providing the rationale that's going to motivate them. So even if they don't intrinsically find Shakespeare valuable, for example, like the example you spoke about before, you're actually telling them, well, this is what educated people know. And if you want a job where you don't have to have a shower after work, this is the kind of things you need to do.
Yeah, it was amazing how that really clicked. And I do use a lot of those things, marketing, advertising. That's where you use figurative language, creativity, and writing and stuff. I mean, it's used in everything, but we're not expecting people to be writing a movie or writing a hit pop music or pop song, but it's really used every company has marketing in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been a real joy and an honor for Rebecca and I, given all the work that we've done looking at your collected work, so to speak, in terms of your textbooks, but also the training that you have available to so many people in America and in Australia and beyond. So we really want to thank you for being on Chalk Dust today, John.
Well, thanks for having me here. I think we're all trying to do this. How can we take instruction to the next level with technique?
Absolutely. And I've learned a lot today already. Nathaniel, do you have any takeaways from today that you're going to try to implement in your own practice?
Yes, I do. In fact, I used to do that sort of teaching side by side or jumping in and helping teachers in real time in my previous coaching roles before what I'm doing now. And I'm glad that John is saying that sort of in situ coaching is actually really workable. And it's not something that's done in a lot of coaching models here in Australia. So I'm actually going to start bringing that back. It'd be great.
Yeah, and I'm going to start using those sentence stems as well. Like I work with fairly literate girls who, speak reasonably formally, but I think that prompt, it kind of gives also struggling students a way to actually get started with a particular response. So it means they're not fumbling around for that first word. So I'm going to make sure that's embedded in each of my check for understanding slides. This is exactly how I want you to respond.
Yeah. And one thing I learned from the NAPLAN pronoun reference, don't let the students answer with a pronoun. It's not it. It's the character, the text structure, the analysis,
That's a good tip.
the linear equation. I'll give you my summary here. You need to provide structured processing time for students. That's when the brain is processing. It's the pair share, explain your answer, justify, how do you know, explain to your partner. So I think my takeaway today is provide structured processing time so you're not just talking.
So important.
I'm a big fan of structure.
Yes, as am I. And we want to thank you, all of the listeners who have been tuning in. The feedback we've been receiving about the episodes have been really thoughtful and encouraging.
Absolutely. So don't forget to like or rate us on one of our streaming platforms, and we'll see you next time.